I sat at our family Christmas table, cutting my turkey methodically while my brother Marcus sneered across from me. Playing entrepreneur again? Penny? He chuckled, gesturing dismissively with his fork. Dad joined the laughter, shaking his head. Seriously, stick to your day job as a bank teller. Some people just aren't cut out for business. The extended family erupted in familiar mockery. I remained silent, chewing slowly, watching their smug faces. Then Marcus's phone buzzed. He glanced down, his confident grin vanishing instantly. The color drained from his cheeks as he read the message aloud. Your business loan application requires personal approval from the bank's new owner. He looked up at me, and I finally allowed myself to smile. 6 months earlier, the July heat had been suffocating during our annual family barbecue. I stood near the grill, watching Dad flip burgers while working up the courage to make my announcement. The backyard buzzed with relatives clutching cold beers and complaining about the weather. Uncle Pete was telling his tired story about the restaurant that failed in '87 for the 100th time. Everyone, I have some news, I called out, my voice cutting through the chatter. The conversations died down as family members turned toward me with curious expressions. I resigned from First National Bank yesterday. I'm starting my own business consulting firm. The silence lasted exactly 3 seconds before Marcus burst into laughter. Are you kidding me? Penny, you're a bank teller. What do you know about running a business? Dad set down his spatula, shaking his head with that disappointed expression I knew too well. Penny, honey, this is completely delusional. You've got a steady job with benefits. Why would you throw that away for some fantasy? Mom stayed quiet, but I could see the worry lines deepening around her eyes. She busied herself rearranging the potato salad that didn't need rearranging. Cousin Sarah, who sold real estate and considered herself the family success story, jumped in with her perfectly manicured nails gleaming as she gestured. Sweetie, do you have any idea how many small businesses fail in the first year? The statistics are absolutely terrifying. 90%, Uncle Pete chimed in, nodding sagely. That's why my restaurant went under. The market is brutal out there. No room for amateurs. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. I've been studying this for months. Small businesses struggle because they don't understand financial management and they can't navigate the lending process effectively. I want to help them secure funding and improve their operations. Marcus leaned back in his lawn chair, crossing his muscular arms over his chest. His construction company had been doing well, and he never missed an opportunity to remind everyone. Listen, little sister, I've been running a real business for 8 years. You think sitting behind a teller window taught you anything about the real world? His girlfriend Jessica nodded enthusiastically, her bleached hair catching the sunlight. It's cute that you want to try, Penny, but maybe start with something smaller, like a little craft business, or something more realistic for your skill level. The condescension in her voice made my stomach clench, but I pressed on. I've already identified several inefficiencies in how local businesses approach their financial planning. There's a genuine need for experienced guidance. Dad wiped his hands on his apron, his expression growing more frustrated. Experienced? Penny, you count money and process deposits. That's not experience, that's just a job. A good, stable job, Mom finally spoke up, her voice strained, with health insurance and a retirement plan. Why would you give up security for something so uncertain? Marcus stood up, walking over to the cooler for another beer. I'll tell you what, everyone. I'm so confident this is going to crash and burn that I'll make a public bet right now. He popped open the can with theatrical flair. Penny will be crawling back to the bank, begging for her old job within 3 months. Mark my words. The family laughed again, and I felt heat rising in my cheeks. Uncle Pete raised his beer in a mock toast to failed business ventures and the lessons they teach us about staying in our lane. Sarah pulled out her phone, already crafting what I knew would be a social media post about unrealistic career expectations and the importance of financial stability. Actually, I said, my voice cutting through their amusement, I already have 3 major clients lined up. The laughter stopped abruptly. Marcus nearly choked on his beer. What do you mean, lined up? Wilson's Bakery downtown has been struggling with cash flow management. Miller's Auto Repair needs help restructuring their debt to expand. And Bella's boutique wants guidance on securing a line of credit for inventory. I pulled out my phone, showing them the signed preliminary agreements. I start officially next Monday. Dad's jaw dropped slightly. How did you? I noticed patterns in loan applications during my time at the bank. I started reaching out to businesses that had been denied funding, offering to help them understand why and how to improve their chances. I tucked my phone back into my pocket. Turns out, there's more demand than I expected. Marcus's confident expression faltered for just a moment before he recovered. 3 clients doesn't make you an entrepreneur, Penny. Wait until the real challenges hit. You'll see how different it is when it's your money and reputation on the line. Jessica nodded supportively, though she looked less certain than before. Starting is easy. Sustaining success is what separates real business owners from people who are just playing dress-up. The family began to disperse back to their conversations, but I caught the uncertain glances they exchanged. My announcement had shaken their comfortable assumption that I was the family dreamer destined for disappointment. As the evening wound down and relatives started gathering their things to leave, Marcus approached me while I was cleaning up paper plates. Look, Penny, I'm not trying to be mean here. I just don't want to see you get hurt when this doesn't work out. I appreciate your concern, I replied evenly, not looking up from my task. Business is tough, really tough. There are a million things that can go wrong, and most of them will. You need thick skin and practical experience to survive. He paused, then added with what he probably thought was kindness. Maybe you could help me with some bookkeeping for my company instead? Learn the ropes in a safer environment? I finally looked up at him, seeing the genuine belief in his superiority written across his face. Thanks for the offer, Marcus, but I'm confident in my path. He shrugged, finishing his beer. Just remember this conversation when you're looking for a fallback plan. As I watched him walk away to say goodbye to the rest of the family, I felt a mixture of hurt and determination settling in my chest. They saw me as the perpetual child playing at adult responsibilities. But I had spent 2 years analyzing why businesses succeeded or failed, studying their financial statements, understanding their operational challenges. The 3 clients I had mentioned were just the beginning. I had already identified 12 other businesses that could benefit from my services, and I had been building relationships with loan officers at competing banks who respected my analytical skills. Tomorrow, I would start proving them wrong. But tonight, I finished cleaning up alone while my family's laughter echoed from the front yard, already planning their next opportunity to remind me why I should have stayed in my place. The next 3 months tested every ounce of confidence I had built up during that barbecue. By August, Wilson's Bakery was hemorrhaging cash despite implementing every financial strategy I had recommended. The owner, elderly Mrs. Wilson, met with me in her flour-dusted back office, spreading invoices across a folding table that wobbled with every movement. I followed your cash flow projections exactly, Penny, but the supplier payments are coming due faster than the revenue cycles you calculated. She pushed her glasses up her nose, leaving a streak of powdered sugar on the lens. Maybe your brother was right about needing more practical experience. My stomach twisted as I reviewed the numbers again. The seasonal fluctuations had been more severe than historical data suggested, and a new competitor had opened just 4 blocks away, splitting the customer base I had counted on. Miller's Auto Repair faced an even worse situation. The city had suddenly changed zoning requirements, demanding expensive environmental compliance upgrades that would cost $30,000 the business simply didn't have. Tony Miller stood in his greasy coveralls next to a hydraulic lift, gesturing angrily at the official notice. Your business plan assumed stable operating conditions, but you can't predict bureaucratic nonsense like this, he said, crumpling the compliance notice. I'm starting to think I should have stuck with the bank's original advice to downsize instead of expand. Bella's boutique presented the most heartbreaking failure. The supplier I had helped them negotiate a contract with had abruptly filed for bankruptcy, leaving them with no inventory and no refund on their advance payment. Maria Gonzalez sat surrounded by empty clothing racks, her dreams of expanding into online sales evaporating, along with her financial stability. I trusted your analysis of their financial strength, she said quietly, not meeting my eyes. Now I'm worse off than when I started. Maybe some of us aren't meant to think bigger. Each failure felt like a physical blow, but the real pain came from my family's reaction. Marcus had been busy spreading word throughout the local business community about my supposed incompetence. I discovered this during a meeting with a potential new client, a restaurant owner who mentioned that someone in construction had warned him about amateurs pretending to be consultants. The phone calls from family members came regularly. Dad's voice carried that familiar tone of disappointed authority when he called one evening in September. "Penny, your mother and I have been talking. We think it's time to consider coming home and finding stable work again. This experiment has gone on long enough." "I'm working 18 hours a day trying to turn these situations around," I protested, pacing around my tiny studio apartment while eating ramen noodles for the 4th night in a row. "That's exactly the problem. You're burning yourself out for something that isn't working. There's no shame in admitting when you're in over your head." Mom got on the extension, her voice gentle but firm. "Sweetheart, we love you, and we want to see you succeed, but maybe success means something different than what you originally thought." Amanda called and said her accounting firm has an opening that would be perfect for you. Amanda had been my college roommate, and her pity offer stung worse than my client's disappointments. The accounting firm position would pay well and offer the stability my parents craved, but it would also confirm everyone's belief that I had been foolish to try something independent. The worst moment came during our October family dinner, where Marcus announced that his construction company had landed a 7-figure municipal contract to renovate the downtown courthouse. He stood at the head of the table like a conquering hero, describing the project's scope while Jessica beamed beside him. "Sometimes you have to think really big to achieve real success," he said, clearly directing the comment toward me. "Small thinking leads to small results." Jessica raised her wine glass in a toast. "To my brilliant boyfriend, who knows how to turn vision into reality." The extended family applauded enthusiastically. Uncle Pete clapped Marcus on the back, announcing that this was how real business should be conducted. Sarah took photos for her social media, captioning them with hashtags about entrepreneurial excellence and family pride. I sat quietly, picking at my mashed potatoes, while they celebrated Marcus's achievement. Nobody asked about my struggling clients or my attempts to salvage their situations. I had become invisible at these gatherings, the cautionary tale they could point to when discussing the importance of realistic expectations. Later that evening, I overheard Marcus talking on his phone outside the restaurant where we had moved for dessert. His voice carried clearly through the open window, and his words made my blood run cold. "Yeah, I told Morrison you might contact him about business consulting, but I had to be honest about your track record. 3 failures in 3 months speaks for itself." He was actively sabotaging my reputation. Every potential client I tried to reach had already been warned against working with me. Marcus was systematically destroying my chances of building the business I had dreamed about. But as I listened to him continue his conversation, something in his tone caught my attention. Beneath the confident words about his municipal contract, I detected an undercurrent of stress. He mentioned payment delays and unexpected material costs, brushing them off as minor inconveniences, but his voice carried tension I had never heard before. That night, I began researching construction industry contracts and municipal bidding processes. If Marcus was going to play dirty, I needed to understand the game he was playing. What I discovered over the following weeks would change everything. His company was operating on dangerously thin margins, leveraging everything against the courthouse project's success. The municipal contract had penalty clauses for delays that could bankrupt him if anything went wrong. And based on his spending patterns, which I could observe through his increasingly expensive lifestyle choices, he was already counting money he hadn't yet earned. Jessica's new designer handbags, their talk of European vacations, the lease on his upgraded truck, everything suggested someone living beyond his means while projecting an image of prosperity. As November arrived and my own business continued struggling, I realized that Marcus's apparent success might be as fragile as my apparent failures. The difference was that he was better at hiding his vulnerabilities while actively working to ensure mine remained visible to everyone who mattered. But I was about to discover that appearances could be deceiving, and that the game we were playing had rules neither of us fully understood yet. November's cold snap arrived early, matching my mood as I hunched over my laptop in the corner booth of an all-night diner. The investigation into Marcus's finances had become an obsession, fueled by anger over his sabotage and my growing suspicion that his success story was built on unstable foundations. My banking background proved invaluable as I navigated public records and business filings. Construction companies were required to post bonds and maintain specific insurance coverage for municipal contracts, and these documents painted a troubling picture of Marcus's true financial position. The courthouse renovation project, which he had presented as his crowning achievement, carried a completion deadline of March 15th with penalty clauses that escalated dramatically after that date. For every week of delay beyond the deadline, the city would withhold 15% of remaining payments. A month-long delay would effectively eliminate his profit margin entirely. More concerning were the supplier agreements I found through industry connections I had developed during my consulting work. Marcus had negotiated extended payment terms that suggested cash flow problems rather than negotiating strength. 60-day payment schedules were standard for struggling companies, not thriving ones. The real revelation came when I discovered his company's credit line utilization through a contact at a competing bank. 87% of his available credit was already committed, leaving virtually no cushion for unexpected expenses or delays. In construction, unexpected problems were inevitable, not occasional. Jessica's social media presence provided additional evidence of financial strain disguised as success. Her posts about expensive dinners and shopping trips were increasingly frequent, suggesting someone trying to maintain an image while burning through resources at an unsustainable pace. Meanwhile, my own business was experiencing a gradual turnaround that nobody in my family bothered to notice. Mrs. Wilson's bakery had stabilized after I helped her negotiate a partnership with a local coffee shop, creating a reliable revenue stream that offset the seasonal fluctuations. Tony Miller's auto repair had qualified for a small business grant to cover the environmental compliance costs, allowing him to proceed with his expansion plans. Most significantly, Maria's boutique had become a genuine success story after I connected her with a cooperative of local designers who could provide unique inventory at sustainable prices. Her revenue had tripled in 6 weeks, and she was considering opening a second location. These victories were quiet and steady, lacking the dramatic flair of Marcus's municipal contract announcement, but they represented genuine business growth built on solid foundations. I had learned valuable lessons about risk assessment and contingency planning that made my advice more practical and reliable. New clients began reaching out through referrals from my satisfied customers. A family restaurant struggling with inventory management, a small accounting firm needing help with business development strategies, a tech startup requiring financial restructuring to attract investors. Each new project taught me something different about business challenges and solutions. I was developing expertise through real-world problem-solving rather than theoretical knowledge, exactly the kind of practical experience my family had claimed I lacked. The irony wasn't lost on me that my business was growing stronger while Marcus's empire showed increasing signs of strain. His attempts to sabotage my reputation had backfired in unexpected ways, forcing me to work harder and think more creatively about serving my clients' needs. During one late-night research session, I stumbled across information that changed my understanding of the entire situation. Several municipal contracts in our region had been investigated for bid manipulation, with contractors accused of coordinating their proposals to ensure predetermined winners. Marcus's courthouse project had been part of that investigation, though no charges had been filed. The scrutiny had delayed project approval by 2 months, pushing the completion timeline dangerously close to winter weather conditions that could cause further delays. More troubling was the pattern of cost overruns on similar projects. Environmental remediation requirements, structural surprises, and material price increases had plagued courthouse renovations in 3 neighboring counties. Marcus's bid had been aggressively low, suggesting either inexperience with such projects or desperate need for the contract regardless of its profitability. I began to understand why he had been so anxious to discredit my business consulting work. If his own company failed spectacularly, having a sister with expertise in business analysis and turnaround strategies could become embarrassing rather than merely annoying. The final piece of the puzzle emerged through my growing network of business contacts. Regional banks had begun requiring additional oversight for construction loans, particularly those tied to municipal contracts. Several contractors had been forced to accept reduced credit lines or additional collateral requirements. First National Bank, my former employer, was rumored to be changing ownership. The existing management had faced criticism for lax lending standards that contributed to several high-profile business failures. New ownership typically meant stricter approval processes and more thorough financial analysis. If Marcus needed additional funding to complete his project, he would face a much more rigorous evaluation process than he had encountered before. His current debt-to-income ratio and credit utilization would likely trigger automatic reviews that could reveal the financial instability I had discovered. As December arrived and Christmas invitations were extended, I faced a moral dilemma that kept me awake despite my exhaustion. I possessed information that could destroy Marcus's business and reputation, just as he had tried to destroy mine. The difference was that my information was accurate and verifiable, while his sabotage had been based on prejudice and arrogance. But using that information for revenge would make me no better than he was. My business was succeeding because I had focused on helping clients rather than hurting competitors. That ethical foundation had become central to my professional identity, and abandoning it would undermine everything I had built. The Christmas invitation arrived with its usual undertone of condescension. "Hope you can join us for another family gathering," Mom had written. "Marcus has some exciting news to share about his business expansion." I stared at that invitation for a long time, knowing that the gathering would likely be another opportunity for family mockery and celebration of Marcus's supposed success. They had no idea how precarious his situation had become, or how substantially my own prospects had improved. But as I prepared to face another round of family judgment, I received a phone call that would change everything in ways none of us could have anticipated. The voice on the other end belonged to someone who had been watching my work more carefully than I had realized. The call came on a Tuesday morning, 2 weeks before Christmas, while I was reviewing financial projections for the tech startup that had become one of my most promising clients. The unfamiliar number displayed on my phone screen gave no hint of how dramatically it would alter my circumstances. "Miss Williams? This is Catherine Walsh. I understand you've been doing business consulting work in our area. I'd like to discuss a potential opportunity." Catherine Walsh. Even I recognized that name. She had built a regional banking empire from a single community bank inherited from her father, transforming it into a network of 15 branches across 3 states. Her reputation for identifying talent and building successful teams was legendary in business circles. "I've been following your work with several local businesses," she continued. "Your approach to financial analysis and operational improvement has caught my attention." We arranged to meet that afternoon at her downtown office, a gleaming tower that commanded respect from every angle. As I rode the elevator to the 42nd floor, my stomach churned with nervous excitement. Whatever this opportunity involved, it represented validation from someone whose opinion carried significant weight. Catherine's office reflected her success without being ostentatious. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic city views, while tasteful artwork and comfortable furniture created an environment that felt both professional and welcoming. She stood to greet me, a woman in her 50s with silver hair and intelligent eyes that seemed to assess everything with careful precision. "Please, sit down. I'll be direct about why I asked you here." She settled behind her desk, folding her hands. "I'm acquiring First National Bank. The current management has made some questionable decisions that created opportunities for someone willing to clean house. My former employer." The irony was staggering. "I see. I've been researching the bank's recent performance, including their lending practices and business development strategies. Your name came up repeatedly in my conversations with successful local businesses." She pulled out a folder thick with documentation. Wilson's Bakery, Miller's Auto Repair, Bella's Boutique, Morrison's Restaurant, Davidson Accounting, Tech Venture Solutions. Every owner credited you with turning their business around. I had no idea my reputation had spread so widely. Marcus's sabotage efforts had apparently failed to reach the business owners who mattered most. "I'm looking for someone to serve as Vice President of Business Development," Catherine continued. The position involves overseeing all business loan approvals above $50,000, developing relationships with commercial clients, and implementing strategies to support sustainable business growth in our market area. The salary she mentioned was more than double what I had earned as a bank teller, with benefits that included profit sharing and equity participation in the expanded banking network. The position would give me authority to shape lending policies and directly influence which businesses received funding support. Why me? I asked, though part of me already understood. Because you've demonstrated something rare in this industry, the ability to analyze businesses accurately while maintaining genuine concern for their success. She leaned forward slightly. Too many bankers focus on protecting the bank's interests without understanding that sustainable business success serves everyone's interests. The offer felt surreal after months of family mockery and financial struggle. Catherine explained that she wanted someone with integrity to rebuild the bank's reputation after previous management's failures had damaged relationships with the business community. "I have one condition," I said, surprising myself with my boldness. "I'd like to start after New Year's Day. I have consulting commitments I need to fulfill properly." Catherine smiled for the first time during our meeting. "That's exactly the kind of professional responsibility I'm looking for. Most people in your position would abandon their clients immediately for this opportunity." We spent another hour discussing my vision for business development and the changes Catherine planned to implement. Her approach focused on partnership rather than exploitation, supporting local business growth while maintaining sound banking practices. It aligned perfectly with the philosophy I had developed through my consulting work. The confidentiality agreement I signed prevented me from discussing my new position until the bank acquisition was finalized. This secrecy would allow me to observe my family's continued mockery while knowing that everything was about to change in ways they couldn't imagine. Over the following days, I completed my consulting projects with renewed energy. The restaurant client achieved profitability for the first time in 18 months after implementing inventory management systems I had designed. The accounting firm secured 3 major new clients using business development strategies we had crafted together. The tech startup attracted a significant investor who was impressed by their restructured financial projections. Each success reinforced my confidence in the path I had chosen. The skills I had developed through months of struggle and learning were now creating value for multiple businesses, while positioning me for a role that would expand my influence dramatically. Marcus remained oblivious to my improving circumstances, focused entirely on his own mounting challenges. I observed him during family gatherings, noticing the subtle signs of stress he tried to hide behind his confident facade. His jokes about my failed business ventures became more frequent and bitter, suggesting that my quiet persistence was bothering him more than he wanted to admit. Jessica's behavior had become increasingly erratic, alternating between expensive purchases and worried conversations about their future plans. Their European vacation had been quietly postponed, though they claimed it was due to scheduling conflicts rather than financial constraints. The courthouse project had encountered its first major complication when environmental testing revealed contaminated soil that required specialized removal procedures. The delay would push completion dangerously close to the penalty deadline, and the additional costs were substantial enough to eliminate most of Marcus's projected profit margin. I learned about these developments through my business network rather than family conversations. Contractors talked to each other about project challenges, and my reputation for discretion and helpful advice had made me a trusted confidant for several industry professionals. Christmas shopping provided a surreal experience as I purchased thoughtful gifts while knowing that my financial situation was about to improve dramatically. I chose modest presents that wouldn't reveal my changing circumstances, preferring to let my family maintain their assumptions until the truth could no longer be hidden. The most significant revelation came through a chance encounter at the bank where I had processed my final consulting payment. The loan officer mentioned that several business loan applications had been submitted recently, including one from a local construction company seeking emergency funding to complete a municipal project. "The new ownership is going to require much stricter evaluation processes," she explained confidentially. "Applications that might have been rubber-stamped before will face serious scrutiny now." Marcus's loan application. It had to be. The timing matched perfectly with his project complications and the approaching penalty deadlines. He needed additional funding to cover the environmental remediation costs and potential delays, but he would face evaluation standards that would expose the financial vulnerabilities I had already discovered. The loan would cross my desk for approval. The brother who had spent months sabotaging my reputation and mocking my business expertise would be placing his financial future in my hands, completely unaware that the failed bank teller was now the VP who controlled his company's survival. As Christmas Eve approached and our traditional family gathering loomed, I prepared myself for what would likely be the last time I would have to endure their condescension in silence. Marcus had promised to share exciting news about his business expansion, probably related to his loan application that he assumed would be automatically approved. I had no intention of using my position to hurt him, despite his efforts to hurt me. But I also wouldn't compromise my professional standards or the bank's interests to save him from the consequences of his poor financial management. The game had changed completely, though only I knew it yet. Tomorrow evening, Marcus would deliver his usual mockery while unknowingly sitting across from the person who would determine whether his business survived or failed. The irony was perfect, and justice was about to be served with Christmas dinner. The familiar warmth of Mom's kitchen enveloped me as I arrived at the family home on Christmas Eve, carrying a bottle of wine and the weight of knowledge that would soon transform everything. The house buzzed with its usual holiday energy. Uncle Pete arguing with the television about football scores, Sarah showing off her latest real estate success to anyone who would listen, and the comforting aroma of Mom's traditional pot roast filling every corner. Marcus dominated the living room, holding court near the fireplace while extended family members gathered around him like he was dispensing wisdom from a throne. His voice carried that confident boom I had grown to despise, describing construction projects and business strategies with the authority of someone who believed his own publicity. "The municipal contract market is really where serious money gets made," he announced, gesturing with his beer bottle for emphasis. "You have to think bigger than small-time residential work if you want to build something substantial." Jessica perched beside him on the couch, her new diamond bracelet catching the firelight. She had been posting photos of it on social media all week, claiming it was an early Christmas gift, celebrating their incredible year together. The bracelet probably cost more than most people's monthly salary, funded by credit that Marcus's company couldn't actually afford. Dad beamed with paternal pride as he listened to Marcus's business philosophies, occasionally nodding and adding comments about the importance of practical experience and realistic expectations. The irony of his words wasn't lost on me, considering that Marcus's apparent success was built on financial practices that violated every principle of conservative business management Dad claimed to value. "Penny," Mom called from the kitchen, where she was orchestrating the final dinner preparations. "Come help me with the gravy while the men discuss important business matters." The casual dismissal stung, as it always did, but tonight it felt different. I was no longer the family disappointment struggling to prove herself. I was a banking executive with the authority to approve or deny the loan that would determine Marcus's future, though none of them knew it yet. Dinner conversation followed predictable patterns. Marcus recounted his latest triumphs while family members offered appropriate admiration. Uncle Pete shared updates on his insurance business, which was apparently thriving due to his superior understanding of risk management. Sarah described her most recent luxury home sales, emphasizing the sophisticated clientele who appreciated her expertise. Nobody asked about my consulting work or current projects. I had become invisible at these gatherings, the cautionary tale they could reference when discussing the importance of staying within one's capabilities. "So, Marcus," Cousin Sarah said, refilling her wine glass, "tell us about this expansion you've been hinting about. Are you planning to take over the entire construction industry?" Marcus chuckled, setting down his fork to give the question the dramatic attention it deserved. "Well, since you asked, we've been working on some really exciting developments. The courthouse project has opened doors to other municipal contracts, and we're looking at expanding our capacity significantly." Jessica squeezed his arm affectionately. "Marcus has been so focused on building for our future together. The business is growing faster than we ever imagined. Growth requires capital investment," Dad observed sagely. "Are you financing the expansion internally, or working with bank partners?" Smart question, Marcus replied. We're leveraging our success to secure additional funding for equipment and personnel. When you have a proven track record like ours, banks compete to work with you. The confidence in his voice was remarkable, considering that his loan application was sitting somewhere in First National Bank's processing system, awaiting evaluation by underwriters who would analyze every aspect of his financial situation. That's wonderful, sweetheart, Mom said warmly. It's so gratifying to see your hard work paying off. Some people understand business naturally, while others— She trailed off, glancing meaningfully in my direction. Uncle Pete raised his beer in another toast. To Marcus and his business empire, proof that vision and determination always triumph over small thinking. The family applauded enthusiastically, and I joined them while privately noting how Marcus's smile looked slightly strained around the edges. His confident words couldn't completely mask the tension I had learned to recognize during my months of observing stressed business owners. Speaking of small thinking, Marcus continued, his gaze settling on me with familiar condescension. How's the consulting adventure going, Penny? Still playing entrepreneur? The question hung in the air like smoke from the fireplace, carrying undertones of mockery that every person at the table understood perfectly. This was my assigned role in family gatherings. The dreamer whose failures provided contrast to Marcus's successes. It's been educational, I replied evenly, cutting my roast beef into precise pieces. Educational meaning expensive, Jessica added with a laugh that sounded slightly forced. Business school tuition without the degree, right? Dad chuckled approvingly. Jessica makes a good point. Sometimes the most valuable education comes from learning when to cut your losses and focus on what you're actually good at. Seriously, Penny, Marcus continued, warming to his theme. When are you going to give up this fantasy and get back to practical work? You're good with numbers and customer service. There's nothing wrong with being a bank teller. Some people are meant for bigger things, and others are meant to support them. The entire table erupted in laughter at Marcus's wisdom, and I felt the familiar heat rising in my cheeks. But tonight, the heat came from anticipation rather than humiliation. They had no idea how dramatically the power dynamic was about to shift. Stick to your day job, Dad added, echoing his long-standing advice. Leave the real business challenges to people who understand how the world actually works. Marcus checked his phone, a habit that had become increasingly frequent over the past few weeks. His confident expression flickered momentarily as he read whatever message had appeared, but he quickly recovered his composure. Everything okay, honey? Jessica asked, noticing his brief distraction. Just business communications, he replied smoothly. Success means staying connected even during family time. But I had seen that flicker of concern, the momentary crack in his facade that revealed the pressure building beneath his confident exterior. His phone was probably buzzing with messages from suppliers, subcontractors, or project managers dealing with the courthouse renovations mounting complications. As dessert was served and the evening moved toward its traditional conclusion, Marcus's phone buzzed again. This time, his confident smile vanished entirely as he read the message. The color drained from his face, and his hands trembled almost imperceptibly. What is it? Jessica asked, alarm creeping into her voice. Marcus stared at his phone screen, reading the message twice before looking up at the expectant faces around the table. When he spoke, his voice had lost its characteristic boom. My business loan application requires personal approval from the bank's new owner. I have to meet with them on December 27th. The room fell silent except for the crackling fireplace. Uncle Pete set down his coffee cup with a confused expression. That seems unusual. Don't banks have standard approval processes? The message says the new ownership wants to personally review all significant business loan applications before finalizing approval, Marcus read aloud, his confidence cracking further with each word. Dad frowned with concern. New ownership? What happened to the regular loan officers you've been working with? First National Bank was acquired, Marcus explained, his voice growing smaller. The new owners are implementing stricter evaluation standards. Jessica leaned closer, trying to read over his shoulder. What does that mean for us? I don't know yet, Marcus admitted, the words seemingly difficult for him to speak. I guess we'll find out after Christmas. He looked up from his phone, his eyes sweeping around the table before settling on my face. For the first time in months, his expression held uncertainty rather than condescension. "Penny, you used to work at First National, right? Do you know anything about new ownership or policy changes?" I set down my fork carefully, meeting his gaze with the calm confidence I had learned to maintain during difficult business negotiations. "Banking ownership changes can definitely affect lending standards," I replied neutrally. "Do you think?" Marcus began, then stopped himself. For a moment, he looked like he might ask for my advice or insights, the same expertise he had spent months mocking and undermining. But then his pride reasserted itself, and his familiar arrogance returned. "I'm sure it's just a formality. Our application is rock solid, and our track record speaks for itself. New owners probably just want to meet their most successful borrowers personally." Jessica nodded eagerly, grasping at this explanation. "That makes perfect sense. They want to build relationships with established businesses like yours." The family began offering reassurances and expressing confidence in Marcus's inevitable approval, but I noticed that their voices carried undertones of uncertainty that hadn't been present earlier in the evening. As the gathering wound down, and relatives began gathering their coats and leftover containers, I allowed myself to smile for the first time all evening. Marcus had unknowingly revealed that his financial future rested in my hands, completely unaware that the failed bank teller he had spent months mocking was now the VP who would determine whether his business survived. Tomorrow, I would let him discover the truth in the most dramatic way possible. The game had changed completely, and it was finally my turn to hold the winning cards. Boxing Day arrived with unseasonably warm weather that melted the previous night's snow into muddy puddles, matching the chaos about to unfold in Marcus's carefully constructed world. My phone started ringing at 7 in the morning, Marcus's panicked voice cutting through my coffee-induced calm. "Penny, I need your help. This bank situation is more complicated than I thought." The desperation in his tone was remarkable after months of condescending lectures about my business naivety. "What specifically do you need help with, Marcus? Do you know anything about the new owners at First National? Any contacts who might give me insight into their evaluation process?" His words tumbled out rapidly, the confident businessman replaced by someone facing circumstances beyond his control. I let the silence stretch before responding. "Actually, I know quite a bit about the new ownership structure." "Really? That's fantastic. Can you make some introductions? Maybe put in a good word about my company's performance?" The irony was delicious. Marcus was asking me to leverage business relationships he had insisted I was incapable of building. "The situation is more complex than you realize, Marcus. The new ownership has very specific standards for business loan approvals." "What kind of standards?" "My application shows strong revenue growth and a solid project pipeline. What more could they want?" I took a deep breath, knowing that the next few sentences would shatter his comfortable assumptions. "They want thorough financial analysis, realistic debt-to-income ratios, and evidence of sustainable business practices. They're particularly concerned about construction companies that have overextended themselves on municipal contracts." The silence on his end lasted long enough that I wondered if the call had dropped. When he spoke again, his voice carried a note of fear I had never heard before. "How do you know their specific criteria?" "Because I'm the new Vice President of Business Development, Marcus. Your loan application will cross my desk for final approval." The phone clattered as he apparently dropped it, followed by muffled cursing and the sound of Jessica asking what was wrong. When he picked up again, his breathing was ragged. "You're kidding. This has to be some kind of joke." "I started the position this week. Catherine Walsh, the new owner, hired me based on my business consulting work and my understanding of local market conditions." I kept my voice professionally neutral, though satisfaction was building in my chest like warm honey. "But you're just a—" He stopped himself, probably realizing that completing that sentence would not improve his situation. "I'm a banking executive with authority to approve or deny business loans based on sound financial principles," I finished for him. "Your application shows several concerning patterns that require careful evaluation." The next hour brought a parade of family phone calls as Marcus spread the news throughout our relatives. Dad called first, his voice carrying the authoritative tone he used when delivering lectures about family loyalty. "Penny, I understand you're in a position to help your brother's business. Family comes first, and this is your chance to prove you understand what really matters. I take my professional responsibilities seriously, Dad. Business loan decisions are based on financial merit, not family relationships. Don't be ridiculous. Of course, family matters more than some arbitrary bank policies. Marcus has been successful for years. Help him navigate whatever bureaucratic nonsense the new owners have created. Mom called 20 minutes later, tears evident in her voice, as she pleaded for family unity. Sweetheart, I know Marcus hasn't always been as supportive as he should have been, but family forgives family. This is your opportunity to show how generous and loving you can be. Uncle Pete's call focused on practical business considerations, arguing that supporting successful family enterprises made economic sense. Sarah's call emphasized the importance of maintaining family reputation within the community. Each conversation assumed that I would automatically prioritize family loyalty over professional integrity. The most dramatic intervention came when Jessica appeared at my apartment door unannounced, alternating between threats and desperate flattery as she tried to ensure my compliance with their expectations. "You have no idea how much this loan means to us," she began, her usual confidence replaced by raw desperation. "Marcus has worked so hard to build something meaningful, and you have the power to make sure it succeeds." "I have the power to evaluate loan applications according to banking standards," I replied, not inviting her inside. "That's what professionals do." Her expression hardened as she realized that charm wasn't working. "If you sabotage Marcus out of petty jealousy, everyone in this family will know exactly what kind of person you really are. You'll destroy relationships that can never be repaired. If I approve an unsound loan to protect family feelings, I'll be violating my professional ethics and potentially contributing to financial disaster," I countered. Neither option serves anyone's real interests. December 27th arrived, crisp and clear, perfect weather for revelations and reckonings. I dressed carefully for the formal meeting at First National Bank, choosing a charcoal business suit that conveyed authority without ostentation. This would be Marcus's introduction to my new professional role, and first impressions mattered. Marcus arrived 15 minutes early, bringing Jessica for moral support and wearing his best suit with the desperation of someone whose entire future depended on the next hour's conversation. They sat in the executive conference room, Marcus fidgeting with his phone while Jessica maintained forced optimism through gritted teeth. Catherine Walsh entered precisely on time, her presence immediately commanding respect through quiet confidence rather than dramatic gestures. "Mr. Williams, I understand you're here to discuss your business loan application." "Yes, and I appreciate you taking the time to meet personally," Marcus replied, his voice carrying artificial charm. "I'm looking forward to building a strong partnership with your bank." "Excellent. Let me introduce our Vice President of Business Development, who has been reviewing your application." Catherine gestured toward the conference room door. "Penny Williams will be handling your evaluation." I entered the room and watched Marcus's face transform from confident expectation to shocked recognition to dawning horror. Jessica's mouth dropped open as she processed the implications of my presence at this executive-level meeting. "Hello, Marcus. Thank you for coming in today." His stunned silence lasted long enough to become awkward before he managed to speak. "I had no idea. When did you?" "I started this position earlier this week. Catherine hired me based on my business consulting experience and my understanding of local market dynamics." I took my seat across from him, opening his loan file with professional detachment. "This is unbelievable," Jessica whispered, though whether from shock or admiration wasn't clear. Catherine observed our family dynamic with interest, but maintained her professional focus. "Penny, would you please share your initial assessment of the application?" I opened the file, spreading financial documents across the conference table with practiced efficiency. The application shows several areas of concern that require discussion before we can proceed. Marcus leaned forward, his earlier confidence completely evaporated. "What kind of concerns?" "Your company's debt-to-income ratio exceeds our institutional guidelines. Current credit utilization is at 87%, leaving minimal cushion for unexpected expenses or project delays." I pointed to specific numbers on his financial statements. The courthouse renovation has already encountered cost overruns that weren't adequately budgeted. Those are minor complications, Marcus protested. Construction projects always have surprises. That's why experienced contractors build contingencies into their planning. Your contingency planning appears insufficient for the risks involved. Environmental remediation costs weren't anticipated, and the timeline pressures create significant penalty exposure. I turned to another page in his file. Municipal contracts often face scrutiny that can delay payments or create additional compliance requirements. Jessica spoke up for the first time since my entrance. But Marcus has been successfully running his business for 8 years. Doesn't that track record count for something? Previous success doesn't guarantee future performance, especially when current financial practices show deteriorating stability, I replied calmly. Our responsibility is to evaluate present circumstances and realistic projections. Marcus's composure finally cracked completely. Penny, please. I know I haven't been supportive of your business efforts. I was wrong about your capabilities, and I'm sorry. But my company employs 12 people, and their families depend on this project's success. The admission of error was remarkable, coming from someone who had never acknowledged mistake or uncertainty in my presence. But professional responsibilities couldn't be compromised by personal considerations, even when those considerations included family relationships. I appreciate your acknowledgement, Marcus, but loan decisions are based on financial merit, not family dynamics. I looked directly at him, letting him see the professional confidence he had tried so hard to undermine. However, I'm willing to discuss alternative approaches that might address both your needs and our risk management requirements. Catherine nodded approvingly as I outlined a modified proposal, a smaller loan amount with structured oversight and mandatory financial mentoring sessions. Marcus would receive enough funding to complete the courthouse project safely, but with conditions that would require him to accept guidance and demonstrate improved business practices. You'd also need to publicly acknowledge that your sister is a qualified business professional whose expertise has value, I added. No more sabotaging her reputation in the business community. Marcus stared at the modified proposal, weighing his pride against his company's survival. Jessica watched him intently, probably calculating whether their expensive lifestyle could survive on a smaller loan amount. What if I refuse these conditions? He asked quietly. Then the loan application will be denied, and you'll need to find alternative funding sources. I met his gaze steadily. Given your current financial position, that might prove challenging. The silence stretched uncomfortably before Marcus finally spoke. I accept your terms. All of them. Relief flooded Jessica's face, while Catherine smiled approvingly at the professional way I had handled a complex situation involving family relationships and business ethics. As we finalized the paperwork, Marcus looked up at me with an expression I had never seen before. Genuine respect mixed with residual shock. I really had no idea what you were capable of, Penny. I'm sorry it took something like this for me to see it. The apology felt sincere, which made it more meaningful than any forced family reconciliation could have been. Marcus had been humbled by circumstances rather than guilt, which made his recognition of my abilities more authentic. Business success isn't about defeating people who doubt you, I replied. It's about building something valuable that serves everyone's interests. As they left the bank with their modified loan approval, I watched through the conference room window as Marcus put his arm around Jessica's shoulders. They were talking earnestly, probably recalculating their financial plans and lifestyle expectations based on their new reality. The game had ended with justice rather than revenge. Marcus would keep his business, but only by acknowledging his mistakes and accepting guidance from the sister he had tried to diminish. It was a more satisfying victory than destroying him could ever have been. New Year's Day arrived with the kind of brilliant sunshine that makes everything seem possible, streaming through my apartment windows as I reviewed financial projections for the quarter ahead. The holiday break had given both Marcus and me time to process how dramatically our relationship had changed, and today would mark the beginning of our new dynamic as business partners rather than competing siblings. Marcus arrived for our first official mentoring session carrying a leather portfolio and wearing an expression of nervous determination I had never seen before. Gone was the swaggering confidence that had characterized our family interactions, replaced by someone genuinely committed to learning from mistakes. "I've prepared detailed financial records going back 18 months, he began, setting the portfolio on my dining table. "I want to understand where I went wrong with the cash flow management." We spent 3 hours examining his business practices with the kind of brutal honesty that had been impossible when family pride was involved. Marcus acknowledged that his aggressive expansion had been driven more by ego than sound planning, and that his lifestyle spending had created unsustainable pressure on the company's resources. "Jessica and I talked extensively over the holiday," he admitted during a coffee break. "We realized that trying to project success was actually preventing us from achieving real success. The expensive dinners and shopping trips were compensation for financial anxiety, not celebration of genuine prosperity. The courthouse project, under closer supervision and with realistic timeline adjustments, had become manageable rather than catastrophic. Marcus learned to communicate problems early rather than hiding them until they became crises, a shift that improved relationships with subcontractors and suppliers. By February, his company's financial health had stabilized enough for him to begin planning sustainable growth. The lessons he learned about cash flow management and realistic project bidding were already improving his competitiveness for future contracts. Our family dynamic transformed gradually as Marcus's acknowledgement of my expertise became genuine rather than grudging. The real breakthrough came during our Valentine's Day gathering when Dad asked about my new banking position for the first time. "I'm still trying to understand how you went from bank teller to executive so quickly," Dad admitted, his tone curious rather than dismissive. "What happened that I missed?" Marcus answered before I could respond. "Penny has been building business consulting expertise for over a year. She understood financial analysis and market dynamics better than any of us realized. I was too arrogant to see it." The admission stunned Dad into silence, while Mom beamed with pride that had been absent from her expressions during previous family gatherings. Uncle Pete asked detailed questions about my work with local businesses, genuinely interested in the strategies I had developed. Sarah's transformation was the most dramatic. She approached me privately after dinner, explaining that her real estate business had encountered challenges with commercial property financing. "Would you be willing to provide some guidance? I realize now that I could learn a lot from your approach to business analysis." Jessica's evolution proved equally surprising. Her initial resentment about the reduced loan amount had given way to appreciation for the financial stability it had created. The pressure of trying to maintain an expensive lifestyle was exhausting, she confided during a shopping trip where she helped me select professional wardrobe additions. "Having realistic financial boundaries actually feels liberating." Spring brought validation in the form of industry recognition. Catherine nominated me for a Regional Banking Association award recognizing innovative approaches to business development. The nomination cited my success in developing sustainable lending partnerships that served both bank interests and community economic growth. Marcus attended the awards ceremony as my guest, applauding enthusiastically when my name was announced as the winner. During his congratulatory speech at our celebration dinner, he publicly acknowledged what our family had previously refused to see. "My sister taught me that real business expertise comes from understanding how to create value for everyone involved," he told the gathering of banking professionals and business leaders. "I spent years thinking success meant being smarter or tougher than competitors, but Penny showed me it actually means being better at solving problems and building relationships." The consulting business I had started during those difficult early months had evolved into a side practice that complemented my banking role perfectly. Wilson's Bakery had become profitable enough to consider opening a second location. Miller's Auto Repair had expanded into tire sales and automotive detailing services. Bella's Boutique had developed an online presence that tripled her customer base. Each success story reinforced my understanding that sustainable business growth required patience, careful analysis, and genuine concern for long-term viability rather than short-term appearances. By summer, Marcus's construction company had secured 2 additional municipal contracts, bid competitively, and managed conservatively, based on principles we had developed together. His reputation in the business community had recovered completely, enhanced by his willingness to acknowledge mistakes and demonstrate improved practices. The most meaningful transformation occurred during our 4th of July family barbecue, exactly 1 year after my initial announcement about starting a consulting business. This time, When I shared news about expanding my banking responsibilities to include regional business development, the family response was enthusiastically supportive. Dad raised his beer in a toast. To my daughter, who had the vision and determination to build something meaningful despite everyone's doubts, including mine. Mom hugged me with tears in her eyes, apologizing for the years she had encouraged me to settle for safety rather than pursuing growth. Uncle Pete asked for advice about diversifying his insurance business. Sarah requested guidance on forming an investment group for commercial real estate development. Marcus stood to address the gathering with words that would have been impossible 18 months earlier. I want everyone to understand something important. Penny didn't just save my business when she could have destroyed it. She taught me that real success comes from helping others succeed, rather than competing against them. He paused, looking directly at me with an expression of genuine gratitude. She showed me that family means supporting each other's growth, rather than protecting each other's limitations. I'm proud to be her brother, and I'm grateful for the second chance she gave me to be worthy of that relationship. Jessica added her own acknowledgement, explaining how financial honesty had strengthened their relationship by eliminating the pressure to maintain false appearances. Penny taught us that sustainable happiness comes from building something real, rather than pretending to have already achieved something impressive. As the evening wound down and relatives began sharing their own stories of business challenges and family support, I reflected on the journey that had brought us to this moment. The pain of their early mockery had driven me to work harder and think more creatively than I might have otherwise. The struggle to prove myself had developed capabilities I didn't know I possessed, but the real victory wasn't proving them wrong about my potential. It was helping them recognize possibilities for growth they hadn't seen in themselves. Marcus became a better businessman through learning to accept guidance. Dad became a more supportive father through acknowledging his mistakes. Mom became a more confident mother through celebrating rather than limiting her children's aspirations. The family that had once used my dreams as entertainment had become a support system that encouraged everyone's growth and celebrated each person's unique contributions. As I drove home that evening, watching fireworks bloom across the summer sky, I understood that true success isn't measured by defeating people who doubt you. It's measured by your ability to maintain integrity while lifting others up, creating value that serves everyone's interests rather than just your own. The greatest victory isn't proving your enemies wrong. It's transforming them into allies through demonstrating that success is abundant rather than scarce, and that helping others grow enhances rather than threatens your own achievements. My business dreams had been mocked, sabotaged, and dismissed by the people whose opinion mattered most to me. But persistence, integrity, and genuine concern for others' success had ultimately created the foundation for professional achievement and family healing that exceeded anything I had originally imagined possible. Sometimes the best revenge is no revenge at all. Sometimes justice means creating opportunities for everyone to win rather than ensuring that someone loses. And sometimes the most satisfying ending is one where former enemies become the people who cheer loudest for your success. The bank owner's signature that Marcus had desperately needed had belonged to his sister all along, but the real power wasn't in controlling his fate. It was in using that control to create a better future for everyone involved. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever been in a situation where family members doubted your dreams or business aspirations? How did you handle their skepticism while staying true to your goals? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might inspire someone else who's facing similar challenges. If this story resonated with you, please take a moment to like this video to help others find it. Consider subscribing for more stories about overcoming family dynamics and achieving professional success against the odds. And if you know someone who's dealing with unsupportive family members while pursuing their entrepreneurial dreams, please share this story with them. Thank you for joining me on this journey of transformation, forgiveness, and family healing. Remember that your dreams are valid regardless of who believes in them initially, and that success shared with others is always more meaningful than success achieved alone. Until next time, keep believing in your potential and stay committed to building something meaningful that serves everyone's highest good.